All right, man. So how do you want to do this? We're going to do this study of the soul. Um, I want to get your thoughts as we start this off. I think we're going to make this somewhat of a hybrid. We'll do somewhere between a group study and kind of what'll be this initial kickoff, just to kind of get the ideas out there and see how they land and what we need to dive into more. But in this first one, we'll kind of lay the groundwork, and over the next few weeks, next few Sundays, we'll continue to open this up a little bit more and unpack it. And if we get time, we'll try to tie into where you and I have seen this as the backdrop to the New Testament. We'll call it like
Yeah,
the missing key to understanding what the New Testament's talking about, or what the New
yeah,
Testament assumes we already understand.
yeah,
What do you think?
definitely, definitely.
What do you think about this topic, man? The soul. How did you first come to this? Um, how did you first start learning about this?
Well, the anything connected to the spirit and soul, all these different concepts are things that we're always learning about. Maybe at a time I had a very elementary level of understanding of these things. We talk about things like the soul and the spirit, but nobody really knows what they are,
Yeah,
at least not intrinsically. And so it wasn't until I began to study Torah, from Torah, from the aspect of Torah Judaism and all the sources, Chazal and the sages and the Kabbalists, that I actually start understanding the different levels of consciousness that we have within our soul, which is far out. And
yeah,
these are things that everyone needs to know, because everyone has a soul, and this is our main connection to spirituality, to God,
yeah,
to our service, to the things that we do, things that are lasting. We are souls in a body. And when God put us in our body in this lowest world, in order that our actions can count, we're all here trying to complete a mission and complete our specific missions in this world, and we can't do them without having somewhat of an understanding of these concepts of the soul. And James, man, I thought that we should start by talking about, according to Kabbalah, you know, creation. You know, Creation, for example, is composed of five major categories of consciousness called olamot. You've spoken about this concept a lot of times. The
yeah,
worlds, or in other places, it's called universes. The five worlds are derived from a sentence in the book of Isaiah, uh, chapter 43, verse 7, which says like this. It says, all that is called by my name. And when it says all, it's talking about all existence. All that
yeah,
is called by my name for my glory. I have created it. I have formed it, and I have made it. So the sages, they explain that where it says my name, this represents the universe called the Dam Kadmon. This is the highest of the worlds. And then when it says for my glory, this represents the universe of Atzilut. This is in descending order. And then the other three come from the actual words used in this verse in Isaiah, which created stands for the world of Berea, formed stands for the world of Yetzirah, and made stands for the lowest world of Asiya.
yeah,
Um, Although we give them different names to all these worlds, they're not separate universes, okay? But they are concentric, one within the other. Because remember, this is consciousness. Asiya is the world of physicality, the world that we live in. Yetzirah, the world of emotions. Berea, the world of the intellect. And Atzilut is the world of the spirit. And Adam Kadmon is the primordial source.
yeah,
What do
yeah,
you?
yeah. I want to back up a little bit because you said the K word, Kabbalah. Um, so this is good though. So I think what people need to understand immediately is in the ancient times when these concepts were spoken and taught, they're basically kind of blended together a little more than they are today, right? So the Torah assumes that we see multiple levels, ways of reading it, we've spoken about this before. Today, those levels are a little bit more divided, right? Like you can learn Peshat, the plain meaning of the text. That's what the English has generally been translated into. And you'll have somebody like Rashi. Rashi is pulling from all of the other sources to explain the Peshat, right? So he's letting you know that there's more to this. If you understand Rashi, I've heard people say Rashi is a rationalist. Rashi is not a rationalist. Rashi is pulling from all of the levels, the four levels,
All levels.
one of
Yeah.
which is Sod, Remez and Midrash, the other ones, and he's using them to explain the Peshat. But Torah Judaism understands that spirits and angels are an actual thing, demons are a thing, the afterlife, all of these things that do not really, they're not really spelled out in the plain sense. Today, if you want to understand them, it's going to have to be in the category of what we would call Kabbalah, right? Now, today, you would look these up and it's kind of Kabbalistic. But in those days, in the ancient times, and even in yeshiva today, those are all blended together because they're all valid parts of understanding the Torah. And just to make that word a little bit more understandable, Kabbalah, the way I've defined it, it's the nature of God and how he interacts with creation. It's the dynamics of soul development, of which we're going to talk about, spiritual growth. And it's the science of the unseen worlds. Now, what happens when you remove the soul level, the Kabbalistic meaning from the text, you get very materialistic, black and white, dogmatic understandings that are very foreign to what's being spoken about in the Torah. And like you said, in Isaiah, that verse, when he's speaking about those worlds in ascending order, I mean, this descending order, most people won't see that when they read the verse of Isaiah. But according to the way the rabbis understood, and I'll say even the way the New Testament writes, that audience understood.
Yeah.
And if you don't understand these things, these levels of the soul, which are also levels of consciousness, are not really attainable to you because you can get to a certain level, but you can't really go past it until you start being more aware of what you're doing and how you recruit as many other parts of human expression to level yourself up. And I think it's really good to like just pause on there and understand that the word Kabbalah is not a bad thing. I think we've all heard this at some point. People will have these labels for it. You have to kind of wade into these waters to some extent to start looking at the soul and parsing it out. Otherwise, you're left with the Hellenistic kind of outworking that people have today, where it's just a body and a soul, and it's that simple. Body decays and the soul goes up forever and ever, amen, right? It's not that simple. That kind of removes the reason we're here on earth, what we're even here for. It's kind of a weird way to, actually, it kind of takes creation and you can see where materialists would look at creation and say, what, do we just wait around until we die and then your soul goes up? That's kind of a weird existence, isn't it? Right? So that's where we're kind of diving in and saying, open your mind a little bit, because you may have heard Kabbalah is a bad thing. You'll see why it's valuable and useful, and you'll see why it's more close to home than we're aware.
The New Testament. I mean, most of our friends who come from like a Christian background, and Kabbalah has a bad name for various reasons. It has a bad name amongst Christians, but it's silly because anyone who's a Christian is somewhat acquainted with the New Testament. They need to know that the concepts spoken of the New Testament are very high spiritual matters. A lot of the concepts spoken of in the New Testament. And, there was a friend who asked the other day in a post, and she asked, so what concepts of the Kabbalah are spoken in the New Testament? I was like, I just started, off the top of my head, just started like listing off a bunch of them, the concept of the Son of Man and the way that Yeshua uses it in Daniel. This is things that are part of the Maaseh Merkava, the Kabbalah. The concept of the ladder of Jacob, okay? And they actually connected to the Messiah, something that I've only seen in places that speak about Kabbalistic concepts the same exact way. The concept of the bronze serpent and its connection to the Messiah, things that you see it in the Targum. And the Targum is like speaks almost word for word, something that John in the book of John speaks about it. and then we can go on and on and on. You know, the concept of Gilgulim, it's in the New Testament,
Yeah, Boar,
reincarnation,
yep.
the boar, all these concepts are there, and these are Kabbalistic concepts. I've only seen them in the Kabbalah, and in different
True.
modes of interpretation of Torah Judaism.
Yeah, I would say the fact that these aren't understood is how you get to very problematic understandings in the church, which many
Yeah,
Messianic Jews or people who are in the Messianic community pull over from the church. But if you replace it with its Torah Judaism Kabbalistic concept, you can cashier it. You can,
yeah,
and I know some people who are more Orthodox
can
might bristle with
understand
that,
it.
but if
Yeah,
that's because the Kabbalah has also been blocked to a lot of Jewish people as well.
yeah,
So let me do this. Let me start off with kind of the basis of how we got here in the first place. You mentioned it. There are these 5 worlds, and the 5 worlds are actually encapsulated. Picture a sphere in an infinite sea of nothingness, right? There's a little sphere, a little bubble, if you will. And inside of that bubble are condensed five condensed smaller
spheres.
spheres. Um, all of that to say that in that sea of nothingness is the creator, is Ein Sof, right? And these worlds, these 5 worlds, you said Adam, Kadmon, Atzilut, Berea, Yetzirah, Asiya, they go from ethereal to shades and degrees of otherness, of our creation, and from the world of Berea down. And I have this on my website, the hiddenorchard.com. You can look it up. I actually might have a graphic here I can share when I get a moment. You pull these worlds, actually I have right here. Let me share my screen. When you look at these worlds, you'll start to see that they all are a little bit more occluded from the light of the creator, right? So each one is a little bit, and you can see that, right?
Yep,
Okay. So
nice.
the level that's closest to the creator is Adam Kadmon. It's the imprint, it's the exact, it's touching. And then we're using obviously metaphors here, the sages have used, but it's the closest thing to the creator. Now, as the worlds get further away from the light of Ein Sof, the light of the Ein Sof, you start to move into less ethereal, less spiritual, actually physical, because the furthest thing away from the creator is physicality. But
Yep,
when you get to the world of Asiya, that's exactly what you see. Our universe, the heavens and the earth, are all contained inside of the world of Asiya. And Asiya
mm-hmm.
is duality, it's good and evil, it's light and darkness. It's all the things you see created in Genesis. Now, if you look at the graphic on the screen, when you get to the level of Yetzirah, you're not in physicality anymore. You're in the world of dreams and certain angels. It's a world where angels are moving in and out from Berea to our world, right? It's kind of
Yeah,
this, it's a buffer. Another
yeah,
buffer still is the world of Berea. This is where the first created entities start to appear. Um, this is where like things are finite, right? This is where um, things that have a start and end happen. And
yeah,
we're kind of dealing with the warping of time and space. We know time and space is weird in our own universe. It's
yeah,
relative. The further out you get from where we are, time is relative. So what does that even mean when you're in the world of spirituality or when you're in the world of Berea and Atzilut, right? And then eventually we're outside of time and space altogether. And that's what we're in now. All of these worlds kind of have a start and a stop. But when Adam was created, everything was contained inside of him. Inside of him, he had the access to all of this. And these are very troubling uh, concepts to really unpack because you want to be careful not to make them too anthropomorphic or too physical or too concrete. But
right.
the best way I can understand it is um, Adam contained everything in him, and that's the idea of primordial Adam.
Yeah,
Now, when Adam sinned, he didn't reach the highest level he could have, and he fell. And as a result, picture all these worlds um, falling and separating from each other. And now they're gradated, right? Now there's like, now there are levels. Now they're actual levels. They're not all contained. What's interesting about that, each one of these, each one of these worlds corresponds to the 5 levels of the soul.
the soul. Yeah,
And I'll stop sharing this for now. So in all of us, in every single one of us, we have the capacity, we have the software, if you will, to connect with all of these worlds. Now, do we have will we do it? Probably not, right? There's certain levels we just won't reach. That's the work of Mashiach. Mashiach is to bring us to those highest levels and reconnect us to what was lost. That's what the entire thrust of the Tanakh and even the New Testament is really about, because it's all trying to get us back to that context that Adam had. Adam had that ability inside of him,
Yeah.
and the full potential to reach it. He fell, it fell, all of creation suffers as a result, and someone needs to push it all back together. And that's what the prophets are all about. That's what the Torah is all about. That's what even Messiah is about. Messiah is there to help us. We said this in the Hebrew study, to get those things all back into that tight, integrated reality again. But in the meantime, we have to do the work, and this is what the Torah is for. We have to do that work to climb those levels of consciousness, those levels of the soul, to connect with the Creator. And one of the greatest, most beautiful lines in the Zohar is that each level of the soul is a different gateway to the Creator.
Wow.
So when you think about our soul, each level has its own door to the Creator. So our goal is to open up as many of those doors as we can, right? All of them if we can. But obviously we're limited. What do you think about that so far? Does it make sense?
No, it makes ton of sense. It's just far out, man. This is definitely like world upon worlds and upon worlds in here, and it's very, sophisticated and very, there's a lot of background understanding that one needs.
Yeah.
And the beauty. I mean, there's another part here that I wanted to touch on. The human beings and their capacity. And as we get through, we get to talking about. We're going to talk about the three first major levels of the soul.
Yep.
Um, man is inherently and essentially distinct from even the most sophisticated members of the animal kingdom.
Yep.
Okay. Just as an animal is not a more sophisticated plant, but is a part of an entirely distinct level in creation, so too a human being.
Yeah.
It's not merely a more sophisticated form of an animal. A human is a member of an entirely distinct level of creation.
Yep.
Yet many intelligent people err regarding man's unique status in creation. They mistakenly view human beings as members, albeit the most sophisticated members of the animal kingdom. We've heard this a lot from scientists,
Yep.
we're part of the primate kingdom. This ever is not surprising, for one can look at a human being and see only an animal. Most of the times, we see that. We look at the news and be like, yo, how did that happen? Or whatever, People just reacting according to their nature and instincts, just like the animals.
Yeah.
Such an observation appears in the book of Ecclesiastes of Koheles, King Solomon. And he said, for the happenings of mankind are like the happenings of the animals. They experience the same happenings. Just as one dies, so too the other dies. They all share one essence. Man has no elevation over the animals, for all is vanity, says King Solomon in Koheles 3:19. In an explanation by Rabbi Avraham Abini Ezra, he says, this verse records the thoughts of people who are uneducated, and upon seeing that the happenings of man and animal are similar in life and death, assume that their essence is the same, and that man has no elevation over the animals.
Yeah.
To the casual observer, the fate of man is no different than that of animals. But in truth, man is destined for a much more elevated existence than the animals. And this is the reason why we have these different levels of the soul.
Yep.
Shlomo HaMelech, Solomon the king, echoes this sentiment 2 verses later in the same book of Ecclesiastes, where he laments how so few people recognize that human beings exist on a distinct and more elevated level in creation than animals, where he writes, who knows that the spirit of men is that which ascends on high, while the spirit of the animals is that which descends below to the earth.
Yep.
Ecclesiastes 3:21. So I wanted to touch on that, human beings and their capacities, as we go ahead and speak about man as a precious and his elevated levels. which you can touch on, James, which is the nephesh, the level of the soul that we share with all creation, whether
Yep.
it's animals, whether it's plants, all. But we share that, especially with the animals. The animals are a little bit more elevated than the inanimate objects like a plant, right? And we're much like we're very, very connected to those, to the animals.
Yep.
The animals, they procreate, they eat, they have some instincts just like we do. But we are higher than animals because we have two other higher faculties, levels of consciousness known as the ruach, the second level up, and that of the neshama, which is a level up in that.
Yeah, that's a really, I'm glad you brought that up because there is a push, and I don't think it's an accidental push. I think it's an intentional push to darken human minds from understanding the value of our souls and our work ahead of us. I think it's that it's a deliberate push to keep us from understanding what what we can possibly reveal in the world. I have a friend that always likes to remind me that human DNA is 98% the same as a banana. Now, right? Like 2% difference would make you think, okay, we're pretty much the same as a banana. But obviously we have a spiritual component which far exceeds that. And I want to share this real quick before we break into those souls, because I think this is important. You have to
Wow,
understand that
wow, wow, wow.
these worlds, because I'm going to use this graphic to explain those levels of the soul in a second here, but you have to understand when you're in the Sia, the lowest world, the world of physicality, it's a world of duality, it's a world of
Yeah,
concealment, darkness. As you move up, though, you move into spirituality. There's no more physicality. You move into unity. So the spiritual essence of all things exists in the highest worlds. That means every event that happens, every physical object, every rock, every blade of grass, water, every element, right? We're made of the same subatomic particles as pretty much everything in the universe.
yep, yep,
Now, all of those things have an upper essence in the spiritual world, and the physical outcome of what they become in the physicality is what we see. But we need to remember that we're in a world of concealment, as this graphic shows. The world of revelation, you can see when you get higher. Now, people call this in the physics world the quantum realm. This is when you've transcended time and space, and you can see that bird's eye view, and you see the connectedness of everything. We live in amazing times, and we have many metaphors to explain these. Now, keep in mind the dark represents the duality, darkness, concealment, because I'm going to use that graphic in the next slide after this. So the
right.
Midrash saw that in the Tanakh, we have 5 different words that are translated for the word soul. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, Yehida. Now, in the same order, these are going from Nefesh, which is physicality, and we'll talk about that, all the way up to Yehida, which is the spirituality. So these 5 worlds that are now no longer quite integrated the same way, thanks to the work of Adam. We
Right.
have the 5 levels of the soul and access to those 5 worlds in us inherently. Now, don't take this as literal. This is just a graphic to kind of represent what we have here. The nefesh, we get that at birth. This is what
Yep.
it animates our body. The nefesh is the life force. It's in the blood, as the Torah says. So it's what animates a person. This is why it's a violation of the Torah to drink blood or ingest blood, because there is
Yep.
something in the blood that is spiritual. And people who don't keep kosher or just look at things from a materialistic level probably aren't aware of this is one of the background reasons why kashrut exists. This is one of the many. It's not simply about do this and don't do that. There are spiritual levels to these things.
Yeah.
Okay, this is good. So the nefesh is the animal soul. That's what we share with animals. Ruach is the spirit. It kind of works between the next level up and the nefesh. It works between the neshama, which is the level of the soul that makes us unique, right? It's
Yep.
what you and I and everybody in the world, we all share components of the soul. We're made of the same atomic particles. We live on the same planet. We all have physical connection. On the quantum level, there's a thing called quantum entanglement. Everything that's created has a physical connection. This is the spiritual version of that. And Kaya and Yukida are outside of creation, outside of time and space. But the biggest fight for spiritual growth is between the neshama, which is a pure soul. We wake up and we say, Hashem, the soul you have given me is pure, right? That's the neshama. It's the nefesh that wakes up and wants to do what it wants to do. It has the life force of the body. It's the autonomic systems. It's what keeps our heart going and our lungs going. But it's also the level of the soul that can drag us down into sinful activity, right? It's the level
Yep.
of the soul that can cause trouble for us. Now, in Chabad terminology, Chabad says the godly soul and the animal soul. When they say that, they use the word nefesh, but they're talking about the nefesh is the animal soul, and the neshama is the godly soul. So anybody who looks this up on Chabad's site, especially in the Tanya, you'll see the neshama is what they call the nefesh elokit. Now that terminology gets confusing the way that they use it in the Hebrew, but just know that if you're looking at that, the godly soul is the neshama, and the animal soul is the nefesh. The nefesh is what happens when we move our arms and our legs and our limbs, and we animate ourselves. We're to do something. We go to give money. It's the mechanics of it, the physical mechanics. But the
Life
ruach,
force. Yeah.
yeah, the ruach is the emotional content of who we are at the moment that we're doing that. And we'll unpack this probably next week. The ruach is that level that each one of us has access to, that it's influenced by our emotions. So if
Yep.
we are balancing our emotions, we are elevating and revealing that next level. And then the shama is sort of that divine intellect. That's kind of that higher level you, that's uniquely you, that you want to try to get to the level where you are more conscious or aware of that. I don't know. There's a lot of discussion about whether or not we can reach that level so easily. There are many levels in between here, but I just want to lay that out with this graphic because I think it helps make it visual for people. What do you think, Ray?
Definitely, definitely. I'll give a couple details here on what you've already laid down.
Yeah,
The neshama, the whole soul of man. These five levels are in the soul of man. But we're right now we're only talking about the most. I mean, the first that we are connected to, that we know about, because the other two levels of the soul, the majority of the world is unconscious about.
yeah,
There's no way of tapping into those. This is relegated to the righteous of the most righteous of people. So we're not even talking about that. We're talking about the nefesh, the ruach, and the neshama right now. So the neshama, or soul, as it's called, becomes attached to the body while yet in the womb. Okay. And we've already said the nefesh, ruach, and neshama. The nefesh is the spiritual existence which resides in the body and keeps the physical metabolism working and the person
yeah,
alive. Okay. The ruach, the spirit, is the connection between the neshama, the higher part of the soul, and the nefesh. James, he unpacked that already. In the case, I'm sorry, in the cause of feelings and personal qualities. Okay, that's was talking about the ruach. The neshama is the spiritual existence which pulls the man towards God, the individual, the whole of man. It has this constant tug to the soul of man.
yeah,
Spirituality does, God does, to the performance of good deeds, to be pious and humble, and to seek knowledge and achievement in spiritual fields. This is what the soul level of the neshama has man doing.
yeah.
It resides, and the Kabbalah speak that the neshama, the third level of the soul, resides around the head of man.
That's right.
Okay. Now, elaborating a little bit more on these three soul concepts. The nefesh, okay, again, is the lowest part, or called the animal part of the soul. It is linked to instincts and bodily cravings. Again, this is why we talk about, people, the majority of people are what? A lot of times acting like animals. And the Kabbalists have very special code and language that they use. A lot of the times, the nations of the world, not all, But a lot of the times, the nations in the world in the Bible, in the Torah, are likened to animals. So when Daniel has his visions of the last days and the empires, what does he liken the empires to? Animals, different types of beasts that come up. And what is the the kingdom, the messianic kingdom and the kingdom of the Messiah? What is it likened to? A man, an Adam. It says a man. Okay, so it's very important that we understand this code and this language that's in the Bible, that's in the code of the rabbis as well.
Yep.
Now, moving on to the level of the ruach, the middle soul, the spirit. It contains the moral virtues and the ability to distinguish between good and evil. Okay, on this level, you're able to do that. It's you climb to a level of emotions, spirituality connected to emotions. Okay, and then the neshama is the higher soul, also called, and I just learned this, the super soul. Incredible. It's called the super soul. This separates man from all other life forms. It is related to the intellect here, the seichel, how it's called in Hebrew, and allows man to enjoy and benefit from the afterlife. This is on the soul. Your deeds need to be on par on the level of the neshama in order to have what? A share in the world to come.
Yep.
This part of the soul is provided at birth and allows one to have some awareness of the existence and presence of God. The Zohar in 205b to 206a elaborates that the neshama is greater than the ruach, which is greater than the nefesh, and that a person only accesses higher levels of their soul if they are worthy. Sinners do not have access to their neshamos at all. Wow. You know, in the Gemara, I know you're aware of this, James. In the Gemara, it calls a person who may be alive, but is living a wicked life, he's dead while he's alive. He's standing.
Dead
Yeah.
in their transgressions, some might say.
Yes, that's exactly what it said. And a person who is righteous, though he has passed on, though he is dead in the physical world, is more alive now than he was while he was physically alive, as your chart showed in the other one.
Yep.
Okay, so it says they are just living nefesh. People who are dead in their trespasses are just their nefesh is what's keeping their body alive, but they're not working. They're not living to their mission, to what God has sent them into this world for.
Yep.
They're like animals, and animals just have a basic function. They don't share in the world to come. Okay,
Yep.
and so based on this, the Zohar has a unique perspective on the passage in Genesis chapter 7, verses 22 through 23, which says, "All in whose nostrils was the breath of the spirit of life, which is the nishmat ruach,
Yep.
whatsoever was in the dry land died, and he blotted out every living substance which was upon the face of the ground, both man and cattle and creeping thing, and creeping thing and fowl of the sky, and they were blotted out from the earth. And Noah alone was left, and they that were with him in the ark." The Zohar sees these two verses as distinct. First, all the people who did merit a ruach and a neshama, okay, during that generation, meaning they weren't completely sinful and they didn't deserve to perish in the flood, died of natural causes. The sages explain this right before the flood. Okay, so I think it's Methuselah. He died before the flood happened because he was kind of righteous, and he wasn't, he didn't have all his merits, so God spared him from the flood. Only after this did God blot out all that remained, including animals and people who were so sinful they were essentially like animals, bearing only a nefesh.
Yeah.
With these three souls in mind, many aspects of life can be better understood. For example, one is asleep only in the nefesh. Only the nefesh remains in the body to keep it alive.
Yep.
While the higher souls may migrate, they go through the worlds of consciousness. This is why a sleeping body is unconscious and likened to a corpse, according to the rabbis, and why sometimes dreams can be prophetic. as the higher souls may be accessing information from the heavens or through
Yep.
interactions with other souls or angels.
Yeah, man, these are that's deep. Um I just one thing that keeps jumping out here because we have animal here. If you hear or read anything that people are compared to animals, it's a
Yeah,
spiritual
spiritual component.
condition, right? It's
Yeah,
not a holistic, that person is an animal. It's just saying that they are not reaching outside of the level spiritually that an animal could reach, because we have free will and we have the ability to climb higher. That's why these levels exist to us to climb using our free will. Free will is the key either to going up or going down. And when you don't use free will correctly, you go to the base level, which is the nefesh. Like you said, a lot of people in the world, they never get past that. They live in the level of nefesh. Everything is about what they're going to eat next, what they're going to do next, what pleasure and sensation they want, and they go from escapist activity to whatever, right? They live in that space. Um, the ruach, if you start to move, and like so, you mentioned the neshamas are on the head. The ruach is associated with the heart, right? And that's really where I think the battle for free will happens. And
yep,
in Ecclesiastes 10:3, it says the wise man's heart goes to the right and the fool to the left. The battle of the Yetzer Hara is the heart. So the real battle for spirituality is awakening the level of Ruach. That's
yep,
awakening God consciousness, aware of God and aware that, oh, there's more here. And when people get to that level and they stick with it, you can really continue to develop yourself and become way more sensitive spiritually than you were before. Then you're truly living outside above the level of animal. Neshama is when you start to understand that the world is it's connected, and then there's a creator, and my actions do matter, and my thoughts matter, right? And on this chart, I have thoughts is from the level of neshama. You want to make sure that your thoughts are clean and pure. You want to try to get to that level because it's very easy
yep,
to hide your actions in public. You can just not do something in public. Okay, that's a very base level fix to activity. But when you stop doing sinful acts, what's the next level? Doing them with the right emotion or doing things with the right emotion. But the real battle, the real challenge is to then get to the level of thought, because it's from your thoughts and your emotions that activity happens. And there are all these great metaphors in sages about that, but you are effectively supposed to climb this ladder. And this is what some Kabbalists have called Jacob's ladder, the Sulam.
no, that's such an important, a bunch of important points you made, especially, and thank you for saying about that, as human beings can be compared to animals. This is only on the level of the spirit, and we all share in the divine image, and we're all supposed to be rectifying that image. But it's really good that you brought these ascending orders this way, because man definitely cannot be led by his nefesh. Okay, we are no different than animals on that level.
Yep,
Then man is not even supposed to be led by his spirit, because, as you said, that is the level of the emotions,
yep,
and in the level of the emotions, people always fall. And we hear this in outside with our friends, and falling in love and being led by the heart, and I got hurt again, and I got hurt again, this, that, and the other, whether it's relationship, whether it's friends. When you're led by the heart, when you allow your heart to drive the boat, you can get in a lot of trouble. And it's not supposed to be that way. The heart is good. The seat of emotions is good because it's very strong.
yep,
It's very strong, and you could use it to your advantage. But we are supposed to be led with the neshama, which is the intellect, the level of here of the intelligence. We're
yeah,
supposed to be led there, but not just be like not have no emotions to our life. That's no good. It all has to be interconnected
in sync. Yep,
and in sync. The head is supposed to be guiding the heart, right? And the heart guides, the body. Everything should be in sync. And when you do this, you're likened to a whole man. You will be likened to be Adam. You can be like, that's what the sages call uh, Israel. and Adam, because
Shlemut, yeah.
he, yeah, he serves the Creator. He's doing his purpose. He's keeping the divine will, etc.
Yeah, it's the idea of a complete Adam. It's a complete man, a man of wholeness. The
Yes,
Adam Shlema, right? It's this idea that we can be, and that's where the word shalom comes from, right? Shlema, wholeness is the same root from shalom. So shalom is
yes,
more than just hi and goodbye. It's kind of this reminder that these levels,
wholeness.
this our goal in life is to reach shalom. It's to reach that the level of it all goes back to Adam. We kept saying this. And I want to show this next slide as well, because I think this helps make sense. So the Ramchal, in his book Derech Hashem, talks about 3 stages of mankind. And I made this graphic just to kind of show where we are. Adam
That's
upon
beautiful.
creation, Adam upon creation had the, let's just say he had the Chaya. I've heard some other versions, but let's just say he had this level here, the 4th one. He had a
Right.
Nefesh, he had a Ruach, and he had Neshama. He had Chaya, and he had the potential, if
To
he
the Yeshida.
obeyed Hashem, to reach the highest level. Adam sinned. He didn't reach it. The Yechida was lost, and he also lost the Chaya. Both of these levels were lost to him. If you remember the earlier graphic, Chaya is outside of time and space. So what does
Yeah,
that mean? We no longer have eternity in our software.
right.
It's turned off. So all of mankind now dies because we've been reduced to these 3 levels. Now, the 3rd state, Ramchal tells us, is when Mashiach comes and the great redemption happens and people are moved to Olam Haba. We're restored. And that's when we receive all of the levels again. And we go back to what Adam should have been in the beginning. And when we fail, we fall further from these levels. If we don't reach those higher levels, then we remain at the lowest. And this is where I think, and we'll come back to this at another time, but just for now, this graphic I find to be kind of just a visual. Again, these are just metaphors and images to use. But here's what I think people get wrong. When you read about souls getting punished and going to hell, right? We know this is kind of like Christian theology.
Right.
What are we talking about when we have all these levels of the soul? It's no longer just a soul and a body. What does that do to the doctrine of the church when we realize there are levels of this? Which level of the soul? All of them? Some of them are directly connected to Hashem, and some of them are pure, right? Like, what are we talking about now? It really messes up that theology. And the
Yeah,
reason being is because the church lost these ideas from the very beginning, and they really stumbled along and created what came more out of Hellenism, this idea
yeah,
of a body and a soul. And to be honest, the way I've understood it, it's mostly just the nefesh that is the one that suffers. That's why the Shema says, nafshecha, to love the Lord your God with all your heart and your nefesh and all your might. Why? Because the nefesh is the level that's going to have the hardest time.
yeah,
Because it's going to be in this world of physicality. It's in the world of duality and concealment, darkness. The nefesh is the one that's going to struggle the most. The other levels are, I mean, they're closer to Hashem. They're on completely different levels.
the rabbis say that it's the level of the nefesh when a person dies is the one that lingers and is confused the longest before it doesn't know what to do and it stays around the body for the longest of time. And I think this is the point.
7
Remember,
days. Yeah.
once you die, you're outside of time.
Yep.
So I think this is the point where the body is actually, I mean, I'm sorry, the nefesh, that part of the soul is actually doing some of its tikkun, suffering in Gehenna, I
Yeah.
believe. I think this is the way, somewhat of it, where how it's explained. Furthermore, the rabbis explain that for the righteous, they endure their hell, their Gehinnom here in this world, because it all happens in a level of consciousness, anyways.
Yep.
And so they endure all of their transgressions here in the world so they could be repaid their world to come in the next world. While
Yep.
the wicked, they get their any little good deed that they may have done, whether altruistically or not, they get paid for in this world and get their comeuppance in the world to come.
And yeah, to that point, even, I mean, I don't want to give examples that are controversial, but even your wicked people, even your most wicked people, have an element of them that is still a spark of the creator, right? They have a spark of the creator in them. Now, on a nephesh level, on a physical level, I see we have a question here. If you want to pull that up in a second here.
Yeah.
Um, even your wicked people have a spark of the creator. They have a divine element in them. So the divine elements aren't going to be destroyed. So we really like this really kind of radically changes the way we look at people too. We should look at all of our activities and we should look at all the people we come into contact with, start to see them on a soul level. These are people who have divine souls in them, even if they're not activated, revealed, whatever you want to call it. They still have that in them. They have that potential. And I think we have been accustomed over the centuries to not see that. We see
Yeah.
physicality first. Did you want to go ahead with this question here?
Well, what I saw was a comment, which is very true. Somebody commented and said, "It's a struggle
Hmm.
to leave this world because of our attachment to the material world
Yeah,
and the things we are attached to most in this, is what we live for." I guess that's what he was saying, which is so true. The nefesh is connected to the materiality, to material world, and so it doesn't want to leave. And then they also said the souls doesn't want to leave because it's strongly attached. Exactly, exactly, very true.
that's the definition of a dibuk, right? That's the you see them in the New Testament, you see them in the rabbinic writings as well. A dibuk is is a level of the soul that didn't want to leave. It's so attached to physicality. It's actually a really sad state, and they get stuck in this kind of I think it's called the kafakela, right? It's this place where they're chased, as the sages say. It's not a good place to be, but these are people who have lived a life only at the level of nefesh so thoroughly that they've gotten themselves to a point where they don't want to leave and they can't, and they try to inhabit bodies. Maybe we'll talk about this when we talk about Ibor, because a dibuk is kind of the opposite of a dibor. In Ibor, a dibuk is like a negative connection from we'll call it the lower level, and an Ibor is the higher. Um, but I want to show one thing. Did you have a thought real quick?
No, I was saying that it's very interesting that there are some people in this world. I mean, the afterlife within itself uh, is something that is kind of a little bit of confusion and nobody has a lot of understanding. So within itself, it can scare a person, even the most righteous person. It can
Oh yeah.
give you a kind of a bit of a scare because you don't really know what to expect. But I said all that to say that there are some people not connected to spirituality, not connected to these higher levels of consciousness, connected to the creator, that you see them, they're getting ready to pass away, and they're not scared at all because they have such high levels of dvekus, of attachment to the creator, that their souls is sort of like telling them something.
Yep.
And they're okay, they're ready to go. We see this with a lot of people. Then again, you have other people who are so afraid of dying. It's coming and it's like the most terrifying thing. And this can be all connected, whether you're very far from the creator in your attachments through your soul or you're very connected.
Yeah, and this is one of those things where people who are living a life doing the best they can to reveal those levels of the soul. I mean, hey, that's what life is about. That's the goal. That's what we're supposed to be doing here.
Yeah.
Um, I want to, as we kind of move to close this one out, I want to put these together. We'll get some final thoughts after this, but I want to put these together to kind of lay out how we might view this. There's a verse in Proverbs 20:27. It says, the soul of man is the candle of God, the Nair. But it says the soul, Nishmat. Now, so it's talking about the neshama here. The neshama, when a woman activates the level of neshama, you're glowing with um, holiness. You've reached levels of access to the Creator that you're glowing. You're like a candle. The Zohar compares the human body like a wick, and all these levels of the soul, the different parts of a flame. If you stare at a flame, you'll see these different layers to it. And the neshama is the outer white hot layer that is just brilliant. That's where all the light comes from.
Yep.
So the sages recognize that the soul, when you're doing mitzvot and you're living at the level balanced to ferret, right? Harmony with your emotions and your heart. When you're living at that level and you're doing it right, you are like a candle for God. And the Zohar says of this, the neshama joining with the ruach is called ner. So they just say it point blank. When the neshama and the ruach together, it's assumed if you reach the level of ruach, right, you've transcended nefesh. If you go back to the level, the graphics we showed, you're no longer in the animal level. You're at ruach. When you reach the level of neshama, you are the candle of God, and it shines together in
Wow.
supernal radiance and gives glory to the Creator. Now I want to show you this. Here are those verses together. The neshama is the white. The ruach is this part. The nefesh is that spark, and the wick is the body. And if you
Wow,
look
that's
at
so
the
beautiful,
you
man.
look at the Tanya and the Zohar, and you look at the New Testament, you'll see the idea of oil being mitzvot. So they're using the same analogy that the sages had. The oil are the mitzvot. Now, you remember if you read the New Testament, you remember the 10 virgins and 5 have oil,
Yes.
5, right?
Yes.
So some were prepared and some weren't. Some fell
Yep.
asleep. Some woke up and said, "Oh, we don't have enough oil. Where can we get our oil?" You right? This is a metaphor.
They had no deeds.
They had no deeds. So what does that mean? That means they didn't activate those higher levels of the soul. They didn't reach the
Yep.
level of Nair, right? Matthew says, Yeshua says in Matthew 5:15 to 16, people do not light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before people so that they can see your good deeds and give honor to your Father in heaven.
Incredible.
It's
Incredible.
the same language in the Zohar and the Kabbalists
Incredible.
talking about activating these levels of the soul. It has nothing to do with physical candles and baskets or all of these things. It's colloquial language telling us that our job is not to sit still. It's not to, I don't know, how do we spend our times today in modern culture, right? It's getting on the track.
Wasting time.
Yeah, our job is to continually be on the track, seeking the Creator, elevating our emotions, reaching higher level of emotions. Gratitude's a big one. Gratitude
Yep.
gets us up out of the level of nefesh. Um, joy, trust, having emuna, all of these give. We'll talk about this in the next week. But all of these elevated levels of emotion, they get us out of the level of nefesh, and they let us see the world from a higher perspective. And from there, we can resist doing things that we know are going to sever that, and we can start to grow into the level of thought. We can, from the level of ruach, we can start to say, okay, I need to clean up my thoughts. I wanted to type this. I didn't type this in reply to that person, right? I'm going to do what I think I should do. And we start training ourselves until it becomes second nature. And it's all right there.
The sages say in Perkei Avos, they say, an ignoramus cannot be a chassid. Uh,
Mm.
and this is connected with the fact that a chassid is somebody who does more than he's even obligated to. Okay,
Right.
that's what a chassid is. One of the definitions of a chassid. Um, the rabbis also explain that a person cannot be a doer if he doesn't know Torah. Knowing Torah is foundational. You
Yep.
gotta learn in order to do. They say it in this way. Uh, all of these things and all of these soul levels that we're talking about, they correspond to the major branches of Torah study. Okay,
Yep.
these 3 levels and even more. Learning Tanakh is, according to how we were speaking, is likened to the world of Asiya,
Yep.
while the Mishnah is likened to the world of Yetzirah. Learning Mishnah is likened to the world of Yetzirah.
Yep.
The Talmud is likened to the world of Berea, while Kabbalah is in the world of Atzilut.
Yeah.
Okay, when one learns these texts, these different modes of Torah Judaism, of learning, the Pardes, etc., they are putting on a spiritual garment. You were talking about this to me the other day, James. You're putting on a spiritual garment for that soul level, rectifying it and elevating it further. And this garment will remain with them in the world to come, what we were just talking about. Okay.
Yep.
This is the deeper meaning of the passage in Psalm 19:8, which states that God's Torah is temimah, mishivat nefesh, is pure and restores the soul.
Yep.
That's just incredible right there.
And you just reminded me, so there are a couple of verses, but one in particular, Yeshua is talking about, I think he's quoting Isaiah. He's speaking in parables, uttering things concealed from before time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, go back to that chart we had. The world of Chaya, the world where the Chaya exists, is out. It's the world of Atzilut. It's outside of time. It's also the world of the Olam Haba, right? Everything cascades from the spiritual down to the physical. So the secrets of Torah are outside of time and space. Time and space is kind of it's an outcome of Adam's fall. When everything goes back up, we're back into eternity again, right? So that's, as the sages say, and it's a very deep tradition, that's where the primordial Torah is. We're not
Yep.
ready for that. It's too much light for us in this reality. The first set of tablets, the sages say, were smashed because we weren't ready for them. And Moses knew that, and protecting people, one of the traditions goes, he smashed those tablets. Now, the second tablets we made, it's the same stone, but the text on it is not the same Torah. So all of that to say, the Sod is the level that the world will be reunited with at some point. And that's from outside of time and space. So if you understand these worlds, as we keep harping on the book of Hebrews, if you understand the worlds and the levels of the soul, you can completely reframe the New Testament. And it, guess what? It fits back with that mystical Jewish worldview.
That's crazy, man. I mean, that's incredible. It just gave me a thought. I've pondered about this before. You know, the Kabbalists, the sages, they explain that when a person is sent from the house of souls, which is the body of Adam Harishon, the goof, the
Yep.
body, and all the souls that will ever be, they're in this goof. You're selected and you're sent into your mission. You're sent into the world. And when you're in the womb, you begin your mission. While you're in the womb, it says that there is an angel connected to your soul, and I'll explain a little bit about that in a second. And he begins to teach you the whole Torah. This
Yeah,
angel
yeah.
teaches you the whole Torah. Teaches you the whole Torah. When the baby is born, angel smacks the baby in the lips, makes him forget all of the Torah. Please do not take any of this literal. It is a teaching point. It is something spiritual so that you can understand higher levels of consciousness and of Torah, scriptures, etc. So
Yeah.
this is the story. That you forget all the Torah that it taught you. It taught you the whole Torah, all the levels, all the deep. And then you're supposed to spend the rest of your time in this world learning that Torah again. And not many ever do it, but some special people, some prodigies are able, like the Galilean Chassid, like Yeshua of Nazareth. How is it that Yeshua can speak many times about times not when he was a child, not when he was a baby, before his time, before the times of the patriarchs, before creation? Yeshua plenty of times refers to times during the times of the prophets, during the times of the patriarchs, and even before that. How is he able to do that? There's a high self awareness in his soul. Okay? Yeshua is likened to the second Adam. I'm not trying to go there, but I'm just trying to make a point.
Yeah.
He's so connected with his soul levels that he not only can say, Father, restore to me the glory that I had once with you before creation. What is he talking about? He's talking about a super high level that he's connected to, a high level of his soul, which is unity, one with God.
Yeah.
Okay. And not so much, not even that. At this level, he knows who his angel is, who this super part, the sages, the Kabbalists explain that it is someone, every person has this like guardian angel.
Yep.
Yeshua even knew who this angel was, is connected. And I'll tell you, this is a secret. It's not a real angel, it's your higher super soul, which teaches you Torah throughout your life if you merit those high levels of soul.
Yeah, they call it a Magid. The Ramchal had
They
one, the
call it a
Rizal,
Magid.
all the great um, Torah scholars, they call it a magid, but it is. It's connecting with that part of you that's outside of time and space, right? It's connecting with that bird's eye view, spiritual bird's eye view that, if all of time and space is inside of this bubble and it's all happening at the same time, the metaphor I was given years ago by a good friend, it's like life is a film strip, right? Like the big reels, the film strip. It only goes in one direction and it's one frame at a time. Now, somebody who's operating that can see all of the frames in the production room. They can see all those frames at the same
Yep.
time. They can,
Yep.
right? So these are deep concepts. I think we've laid the foundation for this week. Unless you have any thoughts to add to it, I think we've put down the basis, right? We want to make sure we understand nefesh, ruach, neshama, and we want to make sure we start to kind of employ, or at least check in with our emotional and the state of our thoughts between now and next week. And then next week we can kind of go in a little deeper and talk about some of the other mechanics behind it. What do you think?
Beautiful. No, I totally agree, man. I think we covered all the aspects as an introductory level of this study. I'm not sure if any of the listeners who may be connected, I mean, who may be on now, if they had any questions or anything like that, but I think it was covered pretty good, man.
Good. I think we'll wrap it, and we'll get the next one up on the calendar, and we'll see where we go.
Peace. Cool. Blessings to everyone, man. Everybody who joined in. We appreciate you guys.
See you next time.